You're listening to DraftKings Network.
This is the Dan Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Welcome to Meadowlarkers 86. I am Howard Bryant. Kate Fagan is not here. Amin El-Hassan is not here. But let's not concentrate on who's not here. Let's concentrate on who is here. We've got some old friends from the Marvel Cinematic University podcast. We got Anthony Canton III. What's up? What's up?
What's happening, Howard? Long time no see. It's happy to see you again.
How long has it been?
It's been a few months since the disaster of Quantumania.
Since the disaster of Quantumania, and we've got Mets hat behind him as well, but not a fire sale over at your place. Jay Christie, how are you?
I'm doing well, yeah.
What happened to your team this year?
I mean, I think I said it on a podcast we recorded right after the trade deadline, but like if they think that a fire sale is going to break my spirit, they're wrong. It was broken a long time ago.
Exactly. You can't kill me. I'm already dead.
Exactly.
Yeah, it has been a while. My apologies. It certainly has never been my intention for us not to talk on a regular basis. However, this is a perfect time to talk, considering that I just saw the Loki trailer just a couple of hours ago. But before we get started, we have to take care of one piece of housekeeping, which is our Meadowlarkers 86 honorary captains for today. There will not be honorary captains in the plural, just one captain for today, and that would be Matt Murdock. Why? Because 86, January of 86, the epic Daredevil 227 came out. I was a senior in high school. It was the beginning of Born Again, the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest comic story, along with the Dark Phoenix Hellfire Club saga. These are my top two. I'm sure there are others worthwhile that deserve some space, but in my world, I love those two the best. Maybe obviously, if you wanted to go Infinity Gauntlet, you can do that, but these two
shout
for
out to
me,
Born Again. That's a classic.
Huge shout out to Born Again. And we've got Born Again coming in the spring next year on
Hopefully.
Disney Plus, supposedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah, the strike is
exactly. But all things are up in the air because we've got labor going on. So we are in phase 5. I can honestly say, as you guys know, as we have gone on, I am suffering. I've got a name for it now. I'm going to call it PETS. That's my new acronym. Post-Endgame Traumatic Syndrome. I have been hoping to come out of it. I haven't exactly come out of it. I am deficient in a few areas. I have not seen all of the Disney Plus releases. I have not seen Werewolf by Night. I have not seen She-Hulk. I think the last one that I finished was Moon Knight. I'm up on the movies, of course, but I think I've seen the first 4 of Secret Invasion. So I'm finding my way. But PETS is a real thing, and I want to go to the experts. Jake, why don't you start us off as we are looking at phase 5, and as we're looking at the post-Endgame landscape, and as we get ready to see Loki coming out in October, has the MCU found its footing? We're at 44 programs and counting right now.
I would say no. This year was a stumble for them for sure. And I think that they stumbled a little bit last year and they stumbled a little bit in 2021. And I think that while on a like movie by movie quality basis, you can make an argument that there have been lower periods in terms of like, that we talk a lot about how Guardians 3 we really love and we think is, I personally put it in my top 10 MCU, probably in the like top 9 10. Or 10. Woo. Yeah, I do.
Same.
And I think that it definitely, like something like that is a really good and well-received movie, made a lot of money, etc. But I think when you're the MCU, when you're the king, you can't have 2 projects in a year that are full on, they don't work. Quantumania was a disaster, both in the critical reception, how good it is, and it didn't make a lot of money. And Secret Invasion was a quality disaster. I think I do think now that Secret Invasion is probably, I would say, the worst thing, in my opinion, probably the thing I've enjoyed the least that the MCU's ever put out. And I think that when and the problem with that is the things I'd be comparing it to are things that the MCU did in its first two phases. And you can't be doing that now, you know? And I think that whether I always would push back against the phrase Marvel fatigue, because what I always would say is if the quality was still good, people would still like it. But it's easy to get fatigued the moment that you put out stuff that is like, this really isn't working for me.
When it's not good.
Exactly. And the thing I've been saying of late, and before I toss over to Anthony, is it feels like a lot of the bad decisions they've made is that they have been operating under the idea that late 2017 to the end of 2019 is the norm of how successful they can be. And that is a huge outlier in movie making in any franchise. And it feels like so much the post-Endgame traumatic syndrome you talk about is that they keep operating as if each one of their projects can and should be as big as everything right around Endgame. And if you take swings that big, your helmet might fly off and you look silly. It just feels like they're taking a lot of home run swings, not a lot of singles and doubles, and it keeps backfiring on them. And so, yeah, this is definitely the most precarious state I think the MCU's been in a while.
Isn't that also the law of diminishing returns as well?
Yes.
I mean, if you're taking a grand slam swing with every swing, it's not a grand slam anymore. It's just a hit. And so you lose that power. The reason why 2017 to 2019 was so good was because we had been waiting for the culmination. It was exactly what it was supposed to be, which was you lead up to something. If the effect of Infinity War and Endgame had the same effect as Winter Soldier did, or as the same effect as Age of Ultron did, then it wouldn't have hit as much. AC, what are your thoughts?
Well, Bob Iger made some comments a few weeks ago that got him in some hot water,
and remember, disclosure, I still am an employee of ESPN, so I'm not going too hard on them.
Well, no, but I was just about to say he did make a comment that actually did make some sense and did have a kernel of truth into it, was the fact that the MCU has hit the saturation point as far as its product is concerned, especially with the TV shows. I think Jake and I have discussed this on the show plenty of times, and it has proven true. They don't know how to do television. They haven't done television properly. They haven't done television correctly, except for a few instances. I'd say the shining examples, obviously WandaVision, Loki, and She-Hulk, to me, are the three things that were done like TV shows. And there was a reason that people were into them and followed them week to week. And the conversation always continued about them because of the structure of the story. The story at the end of the day has to mean something. And I always felt like, especially when it comes to these Disney Plus shows, you are supposed to get these characters over to your audience in a way that the movies did. And for example, Secret Invasion, Nick Fury is somebody that we don't really know. We have a good feeling about him, but I thought personally when this series was coming out that we were going to get Nick Fury and learn more about him. What is the story with the Skrulls? Why is he coming back? All of that. And the show decided to not say any of that and just have stuff happen. Stuff happens
straight into action.
Well, this is the thing. You could say it's action. I can arguably say it's just stuff that happened over.
Well, let's put it this way: it went straight into stuff.
Yes, just a whole bunch of stuff and exposition over 6 weeks without really telling a story in a situation where I thought with the actors that they had in that cast, they could have told a story that was something meaningful and just decided to put something out that was just there. And I think what Jake said as far as a lack of enjoyment of that series couldn't be more true. I felt so empty after watching that because there was nothing that I could take out of it going forward for any story or any character, especially Nick Fury, who comes in, makes a mess out of things, and then just goes back to space. It did not hit at all. And I think
thanks for the spoiler alert, by the way.
Oh, geez, I forgot you. My bad.
Bad love and thank you for that. I will say also, and I'm glad you both have said this for one very important reason, and that is that I was concerned that it was just me. I was like, maybe I just have hit, because you guys have always been far more enthusiastic about a lot of these programs than I have. I've always found my way with them in terms of being able to enjoy them, but you guys have found the things that have given me enjoyment as well. I enjoy them because you enjoy them as well. But this one, I was wondering, because we talked about it on your program, on your pod often, that for me personally, most of what I watch on television has to be something that hit me when I was a comic collector, when I was reading as a kid. And I hated the Skrulls. I hated the Skrulls and the Fantastic Four, and I didn't I mean, I love the Fantastic Four, but I never liked when they fought the Skrulls. And the reason was because the Skrulls always struck me as an impossible villain. How do you actually beat them? You don't know who's, I mean, it's almost like time travel in a way. Eventually, the entire Skrull story falls apart because they're too powerful. Like, they're too difficult. I mean, and the whole spy, shield, no shield, double agent story itself is difficult enough to follow. And then trying to figure out who's who. All of that can work with great storytelling. It falls apart really, really hard when the story is not strong. These types of stories require airtight storytelling.
And they require great characterization. Like, the way I would describe Secret Invasion is a classic example. I think this has happened a lot with MCU stuff of late. Because I think that one of the MCU's great strengths was creating characters that people loved out of nobody comic book characters. And it feels like Secret Invasion is a classic example of plot cannibalizing character. That so much stuff, so many individual events happen that, like, the thing that I enjoy about a spy thriller is you don't know who people's allegiances are. You don't know who to trust, all this. But that requires you to have such strong and well-drawn characters that it almost feels like they were writing it like basically like a paint by numbers of what they think a spy thriller should look like, as opposed to making it specific in any way. And also it feels like that they didn't want to make the twists too complex because they're afraid the audience might be too dumb to get it. Now, I'm not saying the audience is too dumb to get it, but it really feels like they left a lot on the table in terms of intrigue and twists, because it's like, well, everyone has to be able to understand this. And if you want to make a mass media product, absolutely fine. Just don't try to do a 70s political thriller then. Like, it just, they didn't have to do this.
Yes, it was essentially Spies for Dummies is how I would classify it. And I just think...
And they blasted Maria Hill.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the thing. The fridging of characters, the constant killing of characters throughout this show. And then on top of it, I didn't feel anything to come of it because I'm still wondering, what is Nick Fury's thought process? What is he feeling? What is he thinking? They didn't want to give you that for whatever reason. And to be quite frank about it, it just is, honestly, it's terrible. It's either, to me, it's either negligence or just bad. So which one do you want to be here?
I think it also goes back to a thing, Howard, you talk about a lot. And if you're not the first person to raise this, but you always will bring up on our show when it's right. And this is why I brought up the thing about hitting singles and doubles, is that, like, this is a 6-episode Disney Plus show that is clearly made so that you don't have to watch it. And I think that that's a smart thing to do with the Disney Plus shows, because not everyone has the time to watch all of them. So therefore, if it's something that not everyone has to watch and is not going to have our big name superheroes in it, it can't be a plot that is about the end of the world. They don't know how to tell stories that are not about the end of the world. And I kind of am spoiling this for you, but I assume you know that the Avengers don't come down and fight the Skrulls, right? And they don't. They give a sort of kind of explanation of why the Avengers don't come down and fight the Skrulls, but I'm like, Nick Fury has to be the worst protector of Earth in the world if he's like, no, for personal reasons, I'm going to let the Skrulls maybe take over the whole world because I don't want to invite the Avengers. Like,
it's comically
I think
bad.
so much of what, because like I said, like we were talking about, I think that Guardians 3 really worked for me, and it worked for most people I know. Like, I don't think that we're on an island really liking it, and I think that so much what worked about it for us is while there were like big explosions and, like, technically speaking, a lot of lives were at stake, the stakes of the movie were about characters we cared about. It wasn't like, oh my God, the whole universe is going to blow up, because it's a side movie. It's not Infinity War. And so I cared very deeply about whether the characters I like are going to die. And I think that is the much stronger way of telling storytelling, whereas something like Secret Invasion or the other projects that don't work as much, something like Eternals, where it's like, okay, the world in general might die. So why aren't the characters we care about here? Why is this like, there just needs to be smaller stake stories. Like, that is, I think we forget too about so many of the other early projects that work, is that, like, yeah, Winter Soldier is technically speaking, yeah, a lot of people will die, but it's really just like it's about a new weapon that's going to take out, some people. Like it's not about the whole world ending.
Well, and that's the thing is that those stories, I think what makes it all work, what made it all work, was that we didn't know the stakes. The stakes kept growing movie after movie after movie. And the thing that I really enjoyed most, I think the greatest piece of genius of the MCU up until Endgame was by the time you got to Endgame, the original threat looked so small. But when you were there in 2012 watching Avengers, the original threat looked like Endgame. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And you didn't really see it until you got to the end. It reminds me a lot, I think, of sports teams in a lot of ways, where the most successful teams for the franchise win when you're not supposed to win. You don't win the year you load up and get everybody unless you're the 97 Marlins. But for the most part, your team has that surprise year, and then you build off of it. All of a sudden, you get the 2015 Warriors, and you go, whoa, right? And now you build off of that. And the beauty of the MCU is that you didn't know outside of Robert Downey Jr. how many true stars you had. You didn't know that was an all-star cast. They grew into those characters, and they grew into that cast. And before long, you go, wow, everybody in this lineup can play. But we didn't really know everybody in this lineup could play. And so that is something that you can't duplicate. You can't duplicate the end of the story as if it's the beginning every single time. 100% right on that. But the other thing about this, too, that I think does deserve some explication is 44 is a lot of programming.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. And so maybe, I wouldn't call it Marvel fatigue, but accumulation is a real thing.
Yes.
How long does this go? And it also isn't just 44. It was 44 with no break. After Endgame, they immediately went back into programming. And so that made it hard too. So do we need some form of a breather? Do we simply need better stories? Is the difficulty of this also knowing that these people are real people? And I'll get to that piece in a second, but Chris Evans has a life. He wants to make other movies. And the same is true of Robert Downey Jr. These guys have lives. So is it the fact that the speed of the programming, of the volume of the programming, is not even giving you a chance to slow down and then ramp back up?
I think the pandemic was, unfortunately, what it caused was 2021, where we all of a sudden had 9 or 10 things come out in a year.
Yeah.
And nothing to do.
And that's the thing. It's great for our show, for me and Jake to do content. It's great to review the stuff, and it's great to get into it. But boy, it is a lot. 21 and 22, I think it was something around 16 projects in total if you combine the movies and the movies and the TV shows. So they're now just starting to get in a spot now where they're starting to slow down and talking about, let's just release 3 movies and 2 TV shows in a year. And even that, you can make the argument, and it would be a fair one at this point, is that too much too?
That's a lot.
So.
And I think that this would be a non-issue. And this is an issue I bring up a lot. And I think I'm kind of annoying about it because it's not a thing that fans really need to care about. But like, if the TV shows were costing $90 million and not everyone had to watch them, it wouldn't be as big of a deal. Like, I think what I think they should do if I were running Marvel is that I would, instead of arranging how many projects I'm going to do, I would have like a sort of like this year we're going to spend $1 billion. We can do it across 3 movies. We can do it across 2 movies. But the fact of the matter is, Secret Invasion cost Disney, I think, $212 million, which, although that doesn't mean anything to you or I because it's not our money, that creatively they're making decisions that need it to be one of the biggest shows of the year, and that every movie they make needs to be one of the biggest movies of the year. So that becomes an impossible thing to live up to because I think a feasible way to put out as much content as they do is if you put out like a Guardians 3, which is a big culmination of a trilogy people like, yeah, spend $250 million on it. It's going to make $800 million. But then if you want to put out, say, like a Kate Bishop Hawkeye movie, make that for $70 million. So you're not sweating if it only makes 300. And I think the fact that Disney doesn't really know how to make movies for less than $200 million anymore puts them in a position where they can't make anything that's really that interesting because it has to be broad enough to make $800 million. And also, they set themselves up for horrible headlines when like Quantumania made like $600 million, which is a horrible result for what that movie is. But $600 million is a lot of money. And so it feels like they're...
And why is it a horrible result for that movie? That movie cost what, $2 something?
Because you need to double the amount, at least for any movie always will cost double because of the ads. And then if you're only clearing like $50 million, that's not going to make Disney happy. I mean, that's at least what they say.
I'd like to see those books.
I mean, that's the whole thing about Hollywood accounting. There's a big thing that the writer of Men in Black always tweets about how that Warner Brothers keeps telling him that, not Warner Brothers, whoever made that movie, keeps telling him that that movie's never made money. He's never gotten a residual for it. So that's Hollywood is just like, but anyway, I guess my point is that it feels like they constantly keep putting themselves in an impossible position where like, yeah, if every movie you make needs to be a top 5 movie of the year and you release 4 movies in a year, of course you're going to be disappointed. Like it's such a silly business model.
It's so difficult to kind of put it all into perspective. But if you really bottom line it, for somebody like me, and you mentioned it earlier, Howard, me and Jake are 2 very passionate people about this subject. We love it. We love it a lot. By the end of Secret Invasion, I could not tell you how much I was so ready to just move on to something else, just be done with it. And that was the first time I had ever felt that way about anything in Marvel to this point. So the fact that I feel like that is a sign that there is something wrong. And I think the something wrong is it's a combination of things. With everything as far as what Jake mentioned with budgets and the films and the cost of these films and all of these things, the quality has gone down. All of the VFX stories that you've heard, Marvel has had such a bad press run this year. Between you have the Victoria Alonso thing with the VFX workers, you have that. You have the Jonathan Majors thing. This is the person that you built your entire saga around. The multiverse.
He's your guy.
Saga. He is the guy. He is number one. You have it in quotes that the only reason we decided to go this way is because we have this guy. And guess what? I watched that Loki trailer and I said to myself, man, this looks great. But guess what? He's right in the middle of there. And what are they going to do with that? Because
he doesn't even have I don't think he has a line in that trailer, does he? It's just his face.
Just one brief line.
Just one brief line.
Very quick. And they've essentially taken him off of the marketing of. They didn't release the behind the scenes of Quantumania until about 2 or 3 weeks ago from a movie that was released on Disney Plus in June. And basically everything that he's been in otherwise, I mean, we know the story. He's been dropped from from his own PR agency. He's been dropped from a bunch of projects that he was supposed to be involved in. And this is the one that everybody wonders. He is the face of this right now. What are they going to do about it? It's a fair question to ask.
100%. And thinking of moving on, I always think about this in terms of the actual human beings who have given us so much joy in this. And I think about it when I was watching Oppenheimer, and you're looking at a tour de force performance by Robert Downey Jr., and you're thinking, maybe you don't need the Iron Man costume anymore.
Yeah.
And because this is a terrific performance. And they're still actors. And you know that obviously from a business standpoint, it was very difficult how do you not take the check for what he's done? I mean, his Tony Stark is the signature performance of his career. Mm-hmm. And he's a great actor. He's a great individual actor. And yet when you look at Oppenheimer the same way, if you watch Spotlight or if you watch Marriage Story, there's a lot of great actors who have something else to offer. At the same time, I'm not going to the movies to watch Eternals. The MCU doesn't hit me the same way because as a comic collector, as a kid, the mighty Marvel Society that brought me in here, these smaller secondary characters, Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight and the rest of it, not driving me to the theater. But at the same time, it's like Chris Evans drove me to the theater, and Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Hemsworth, and those guys drove me to the theater. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see what that next spark is going to be. Like, what is the spark going to be? And I agree with you guys, and I haven't said anything about this. I really enjoyed Guardians. Mm-hmm. I really liked it. And the reason why I liked Guardians so much was because Guardians understood the assignment. Mm-hmm. Guardians understood that this is a closure movie, that it was an elegiac film. It felt like it was a goodbye in a lot of ways, and also a next chapter for the individual characters. It was a life goes on type of thing, but we need to wrap this up, and it did it in such a beautiful and sad but also really good way. It really nailed what it was trying to do.
I think emotionally it is one of the most satisfying MCU films I've ever watched. Like, it's up there with Endgame, just in terms of how you felt walking out of that, because of the way that James Gunn, the character service, I just was incredibly impressed with how that story was handled. Building this movie around Rocket Raccoon, mm-hmm. and finding a way to make you, I mean, we like Rocket Raccoon over here. We've always felt that way. But to make us care about him in this way and see what was done to him and why he is the way that he is was just incredible to watch. And I also got to give credit to Gunn for doing this. He did not do the Peter Gamora story where they all automatically find a way to get back together. There is a healthy look at what happened and the realization that sometimes life happens and you have to move on. And I thought that was wonderful.
Hey, it's Mike Ryan, and I've been outdoors more than I'd like to admit this summer. It's really hot. I've been burning through shirts. Can't go anywhere in South Florida without a backup shirt. I'm just telling you right now. But that's going to be the second best advice I give you here. The best advice I can possibly give you, it's cracking open that beautiful white can and letting the great taste of Miller Lite hit your taste buds so hard you feel it in your heart. Have yourself some Miller time, folks. Miller time. You know, the time when you and your friends can get together and enjoy the simple things in life. Why don't you let these wonderful summer moments get amplified with Miller Lite? Because when it's summertime, it tastes like Miller time. The best beer there is. I promise you, there isn't going to be a better decision that you can make this summer than just taking a sip out of that beautiful white can. Make unforgettable summer memories with Miller Lite. Get Miller Lite delivered right to your door. Visit MillerLite.com/Dan, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that it just got easier to be an NFL fan, even if you live far away. Like maybe you like the Bears, but you're hibernating in Panthers territory. But with NFL Sunday Ticket, your out-of-market team is never more than a short distance away. Specifically, the distance from you to your remote control. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
I think that so much of what has me nervous about the next few years of the MCU is that if I were them after Endgame, the move I would do, what I would have done is say, okay, let's just try a bunch of different things that people in-house and our actors are passionate about. What kind of projects are we passionate about ourselves? Because I think a thing that, like, the reason why Eternals didn't drive people to theaters so much, didn't drive you to theaters, is that it felt like they were making it because it was another thing to make, as opposed to, like, even if it's a character you haven't heard of that much, like Guardians of the Galaxy, I think the reason the original one made so much money is because there's just passion oozing off the screen. It feels like it was made by a person who cares about it.
Yeah, and it's different.
And to see, Kevin Feige stand up at Comic-Con or D23 and outline like the next 7 years of projects, I'm like, but what if the project that leads to that project, that leads to that project, doesn't have a lot of juice? Are we just going to sleepwalk for 3 straight projects? Like, what I would be doing right now is, Iman Vellani is an incredible spark in Miss Marvel. We're having the Marvels. Let's immediately ask her what she wants to do for Miss Marvel season 2. Let's ride that hot hand. We think that, Chris Pratt wants another Star-Lord movie. Let's have Chris Pratt like get a story by credit on a movie he wants to make with, one of his Parks and Rec friends or whatever. Like, I would just be finding the stories that people are passionate about and then reverse engineering the way it works, because I think that people overestimate how hard it is to interconnect this stuff. Like, you really don't. You can kind of people don't really mind if these movies are held together by duct tape between them. It's only a problem if the movies themselves are held together by duct tape. And so I just don't know why they're so hell-bent on like recreating the next Infinity Saga when like the Infinity, I guarantee you if the Infinity stuff was not working in the first few attempts, like if Age of Ultron made like no money and everyone hated the idea of do the Infinity Saga, I honestly believe, Disney and Kevin Feige would have been like, okay, let's try something else. But it feels like they're hell bent on making this multiverse saga work, even though it's very clear to me, honestly, that we're at the tail end of multiverse stories being in vogue. And so what is it going to be like in 2027 when we're still doing this? And so I'm just really worried about like non-creative people really overestimate how much of linear storytelling is planned out. Most TV shows you like, they did not have the end when they started writing it. That's just the way that creativity works, because you have to see what works. You have to see what actors work. Jesse Pinkman was supposed to die at the end of season 1 of Breaking Bad. So I think that like it's very frustrating to just see them like going full speed ahead when it's like some of the stuff that you really are relying on working isn't working.
I can tell you this much, Howard. The other day, I went back and watched the She-Hulk episode where Daredevil shows up. And I can tell you in that episode, the amount of chemistry between Charlie Cox and Tatiana Maslany was just so incredible that I could just be stuck there watching those two share gazes at each other. And obviously in Matt Murdock's case, can't really gaze, but nonetheless, their emotions towards each other, the chemistry from that's the type of stuff that you should invest in. That's the type of stuff that matters. That's the type of stuff that when we talk about being MCU fans, this is why we love the MCU, those characters.
When that happens on screen, if I'm Kevin Feige, I'm calling the Daredevil writers room and saying like, hey, I know you're early on. We are having a 3-episode arc where She-Hulk comes to New York, because even if it doesn't, like, we'll make it work, or like at least one episode, because these characters work so well together. And it feels like the fact that they're like, if the whole Daredevil thing goes on and she doesn't show up once, I'll be like, that's crazy that they introduced a character this character has perfect chemistry with. And even though, yeah, maybe canonically they're not together a lot, but like these actors have so much going on,
Well, and if you're telling the Born Again story, she don't fit.
Exactly.
You're gonna have to figure out a way to make that fit. It's a different story. It's a different
tone.
It's such a great story to tell. I would, you know how I feel about that story,
of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am of the mind right now that I think where we're at in terms of the connection to these characters is really all about that chemistry, because it was that chemistry that created this in the first place. Who knew that Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. were going to have that kind of chemistry? Who knew that Chris Hemsworth was going to be as funny as he was? Who knew that those guys were all going to find their way the way that they did? Nobody really knew that, and then they adjusted, and that lack of adjustment is hurting them. Now, for me, one of the areas that I found kind of interesting as well is the creative piece of it all. Like, I watched Across the Multiverse, and the brilliance of that story. It's still it's a great follow-up. I don't love the fact that it's a cliffhanger. I thought there was something a little amiss there in terms of the storytelling, but I also felt like the biggest problem I had with that was character investment. I mean, I thought that it's brilliant. I thought the colors, I thought what they can do with the animation. I think they did for you, what a lot of great movies can do is to show me the power of what's available. Show me what the technology can do. But my goodness, I have no connection to Miles Morales at all. And maybe it's just because I'm old, right? I'm like looking at this and I'm going, okay, I know this is the anxiety generation. I know this is the tell your kids you love them generation and all of that stuff. But you're a superhero. How many hugs do you need? For goodness sakes, how many hugs do you need?
Unbelievable. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but this is the one time where hashtag washed agenda does not work for me here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Howard, you're talking to a man who's named his son Miles, so I don't know how much miles you're gonna get.
But that's for Miles Davis, isn't it? From Miles Morales, is it? Did you name your child after a comic book character?
I sure absolutely did, without a doubt. As a person of as an Afro Latino, as I am, there was a kinship when you see Into the Spider-Verse, and of course reading the books and seeing Miles for the first time, and it's just a powerful, I think, powerful emotional story. And I think Into the Spider-Verse itself, I remember seeing it, and it's just the words, take a leap of faith, all of those things. And then him in this movie, I'm gonna do my own thing. And that's really just like stuff like that. And, especially for somebody like me who sees that, you want to give that hope to the kids. You want to give that hope to the youth that they could be everything. So that's where that kind of is. So, man, Howard, I'm normally with you. Don't get me wrong. I'm normally with you on this. This is one of the few times where I'll be like, yeah, it's a little different here.
I'm like I said, I'm with that. And look, I guess for me in watching this, I mean, I'm just like, step into your greatness, man. Really? I mean, it was a little cloying for me.
Well, in his own way, he was stepping into that because of the fact that this Miguel O'Hara, who had this idea that, well, Spider-Man canon events, people have to die. People have to die. And Miles is like looking at the whole situation like, wait a minute, that doesn't make no damn sense. You gonna I gotta let my dad die? I think that's a fair question.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad storyline.
Well, it seems like that's what they're setting up for the third one.
Like, I don't need any more hugs, man. I don't need any more hugs. All right, Jake, you play tiebreaker here.
I mean, I love that movie, and so I'm definitely on AC's side here. I definitely think he's a little annoying, but I also like
a lot annoying.
I'm close enough to his age where I understand, but also I also can't. I mean, I come from like the most white suburban family, so like I can't even then like I never really had to ask for more hugs because it wasn't like there was ever a depletion of them at home. So like that was never a problem I had. So I can't really speak to that. But I think what works for that for me personally, the thing that works in that movie the best for me is the Miles Gwen stuff. I feel like their relationship is really sweet, and I think that's the strongest part of it for me. And I think that, I think that there's just a lot of, I think when I talk about with passion, that like, there's just so much passion in that movie that like every frame feels like someone, I mean, if you believe some behind the scenes stuff, people were putting their heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears into every frame. And so like, I think that is the thing that makes that movie like undeniable, where it's not just that it's a technical marvel. It's not just like that there's a new technology that they press a button on. It's like it's a technical marvel and a marvel of like human achievement of like we're going to draw all of these frames differently. Like the stuff with Hobie is like, we're going to draw every single frame of him looking different. Like I don't care what technology you have. That takes a lot of time, No,
indeed. And that stuff was terrific. What got me, it was the once again, I think it's just because as a parent at this stage, I'm like, Jesus Christ, enough. Enough.
I have a few years before I get there, Howard.
You sure do. When you get a 19-year-old like I do, let's have this conversation again. And I'm like, you know what? I would like you to grow the up.
I'll say this. The beginning, I was definitely not on his side.
Grow the up.
I was definitely not on his side at the beginning. Like, I'm someone who's like very much. Whenever anyone in like movies rebels against their parents, I just get very uncomfortable because it's like, come on, because I very much have I was an old soul as a kid in that like I was one telling my friends when like they would disobey their parents, like, but don't you know that they love you and they don't want you to do that? And so like I'm kind of way past that, so I'm not the best audience.
Cornball.
I'm a schmaltzy cornball who like I can't. I've never. When I was 15, I would never identify with the rebellious kids in movies, so like I can't speak on the subject.
I said to my son when we were watching this movie, I said, one more rooftop scene where somebody puts their arm around somebody else and I'm walking out of this place. One more. And he's like laughing at me and I'm like, dude, I'm for real, man. I am for real, Balake. I'm out, right? I'm done. But I will say this for this conversation, what we're having between Guardians and the Spider-Verse movies, there have been successes.
Of course.
There have been some places. To Jake's point, what I do agree with very seriously on this is that if you really, really, really try to interconnect everything, you're going to lose both ways. Yep. You're going to lose one because you're asking people to watch a lot of content. And the one thing about the MCU that people would say to me when I was in before we hit the end game point was, do I have to watch this to know what's going to happen in the next movie? Right? That's the first thing. The second thing that you're going to run into is you're going to miss way more than you hit because the hits themselves, in a lot of ways, in my opinion, were accidental. There was a lot of accidental miracles in that 20 movie stretch leading up to Endgame. I mean, I still feel. I mean, Quantumania was a disaster. I still feel like WandaVision was a marvel. I mean, I really enjoyed. I didn't like the Rock'em Sock'em ending, but just in terms of the creativity of it when you started out and the journey that it took you on, I liked that. I liked Hawkeye. I had fun with Hawkeye.
I enjoyed Hawkeye.
I had no problem with Hawkeye. You know,
Hawkeye,
you know, Florence Pugh made that. She made that series, turned it into something. And I thought that so it's not as though all is lost, but I do feel like at the end of the day, when you're watching these programs, what made them what they were was you had showstoppers. And right now, I'm still looking for some showstoppers.
Well, you couldn't be more correct about that.
And Jonathan Majors was supposed to be your showstopper. So where do you go from here?
That's a little tough. That's a little tough. But Jake did mention Iman Vellani. I do think in terms of young people, this is the person that you want to build around. Her.
I enjoyed the Marvels trailer. My son and I watched it. We're like, yeah, we'll be here for this.
Her on-screen gravitas is something. I thought Miss Marvel not only tried some things that were interesting and surprising. I mean, doing an episode on the Partition was definitely a swing that you wouldn't have expected from Marvel there. But also just like her character. Her character is so. It's just there's a certain energy that just comes off the screen. And you feel like this is somebody that you would want to invest your time in as a viewer. So I want to see what they do with her. And I mean, this is the other. I mean, me and Jake joked about Secret Invasion. Where was Captain Marvel in all of this? Brie Larson is a very talented actress. Like, I mean, that goes without saying. I would like to see them actually give her something. So I hope in the Marvels we see more of Carol Danvers and kind of understand her whole deal, because I think from the time that Captain Marvel came out, I feel like we don't know much about her, and I feel like they haven't done her the justice that she could probably get done on screen. So I'm curious to see what the Marvels looks like from that vantage point too.
Yeah, and I would also throw one more thing out here, Jake, and jump in on this, is that I enjoyed what you were saying about the shelf life of the multiverse as a storyline. If you watch, I just saw a wonderful indie film a couple of weeks ago, Past Lives. Then you watch Everything Everywhere All at Once, and you look at the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and for the first time, when you start thinking about the idea of multiverse, and the Past Lives was not a multiverse story, but it was a regret story of like what if had we gone in this direction. Everything Everywhere All at Once was the first time where I looked at it and said that even MCU themes, and that doesn't even include The Flash as well, you're not even doing multiverse stories the best.
Yep. I remember I actually came on because I adore that movie. I saw it super early, and I remember I came on the pod right after seeing it and said that I don't care how good Doctor Strange is is not going to be the best multiverse.
Can't touch it. And I saw that before I saw Doctor Strange.
Yes, no, so yeah, exactly. So did I. And I think that the problem you run into is that there are really only two multiverse stories you can tell, which are you can tell a story about meeting different versions of yourself, which Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse did really, really well. Or you can tell a story about the different possibilities your life could have gone on, which Everything Everywhere All at Once did a version of. And so, like, I think the lane that the MCU wants to occupy is like the use the multiverse to like incorporate a bunch of different characters, which is like a fun gimmick, I guess, which is what the Flash kind of tried to do. But like, once again, if their big multiverse culmination, Secret Wars, was coming out at the end of this year, I'd be like, okay, fine, we're still on time. But that movie is like 7 movies away. So and so I think that they're missing opportunities in that. I know that they've been very, very cagey about whether they're going to do Young Avengers. And I think that is a crazy mistake, that like, I shouldn't know that a Blade movie might be coming out at some point in 2028. Why don't they, like, I understand they don't want to spoil the end of the Marvels or whatever, but it's like, just tell me that at least Aman Vellani and Haley Steinfeld are going to be in a Young Avengers movie. Get me excited for that. It feels so dumb that the stuff that they're announcing is stuff that has like no one casted it. Like the Fantastic Four movie's been on the calendar forever and we don't know anyone who's in it. Like, there's just such a lack of concreteness about the stuff that we already know. And then a lot of like, yeah, we'll do a big Fantastic Four movie. We'll do a big multiverse movie. But like, I get me excited about what's happening now, because it feels like the Fantastic Four stuff and the multiverse stuff is subsuming the Marvels, which is their big fall release.
Which is their big hit. Exactly right.
Yeah, I think the interesting part about that is I do feel that they're about to hit that point. I'm very curious to see what Captain America Brave New World looks like with Sam in this new position as Cap, and them introducing obviously Harrison Ford as the next President Ross, and what happens with that story. And this is your more grounded story to a degree, and also introducing certain aspects of Marvel Comics lore, which I will not spoil here, but comics lore that does intrigue me. Now you have a story like that, but then on the other side, you're doing Deadpool 3 when you're bringing Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine, and you have a kind of crazy multiverse story going on there with allegedly Fox X-Men and stuff like that. So this is where it seems like when you talk about the accumulation of content, this is where the difficulty does lie, because you have to ask yourself, if you are a casual, man, this Captain America movie looks interesting, but does it mean anything for Deadpool 3? Does it mean anything for Loki? Does it mean anything for Secret Wars or Doctor Strange 3 or Spider-Man 4?
And if all of these movies didn't need to make $800 million, that would not be a problem for Disney. But the problem is they need everyone to see both of them. And the reality is, the type of person who wants to see the new Captain America movie, which is probably really grounded, and the person who wants to see the crazy multiverse jokey Deadpool movie, that might be two very different people. The interconnected thing requires them to convince you that you need to see both. And what happens for a lot of people is that they throw up their hands and they say, I don't need to see either.
I can't do all this. And also, I'm not a Deadpool guy. I've never seen a Deadpool movie.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just too violent for me. I was just like, I mean, it's just not my thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like the entire let's joke and blast people left and right it just wasn't funny to me. Just like the Harley Quinn type characters as well. I'm like, that doesn't hit me. Final thoughts. We got to go, but let's go. AC, why don't you plug the pod? Where can we find you?
Well, of course, you can find us. You can find us obviously on Apple, Spotify, all platforms at Marvel Cinematic University. We do have a YouTube channel, MC University Pod. We're on Instagram too, MC University Podcast. All those things. TikTok now, we're doing a couple videos there.
I like that.
We're trying to get more involved in the video game as well. But yeah, we still call it Twitter. I don't care what.
No, it's Twitter.
Don't call it X.
Absolutely not.
No way, no how. So MC University Pod there, if you want to find us there. So yeah, basically, until Loki, we're gonna just be doing different content throughout each week. Talking about different things, finding wonderful people to talk to about different things inside the MCU and outside the MCU, because there's a vast array of things to talk about, and me and Jake are pretty good at it.
Exactly. You guys are great at it. Jake, I would throw one question to you, which is putting your futurist hat on, what's the next hit going to be? What are you excited about?
I think the next hit is I'll give this caveat because if it's horrible, then no. But I think that if Deadpool 3 is like generally well regarded, I think it'll be a pretty big hit just because I think it is kind of taking the No Way Home cameo thing to a comic extreme. And I think that is a thing that a lot of people, myself included, to be honest, even though it's gimmicky, obviously, I will, if they spend a bunch of time like making fun of like the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, I'm not going to like say it's great cinema, but I'll enjoy it. So I think that has a possibility of becoming meme-ified enough to be a really big hit. That is my guess.
I like that. Well, there's hope on the horizon. And I love that the enthusiasm is still there. And I'm actually going to try. I didn't love Loki season 1, but I did love how it ended.
Yes.
And it brought me into season 2. I am looking forward to that. Obviously, anyone who knows me knows I am waiting for Daredevil.
Yes.
I'm waiting for Daredevil Born Again. I will hang up now and go back and read 227 to 233 like I always do at some point in every
and so that should be a lesson to the AMPTP. And this, go back to the table so Howard can get his Daredevil Born Again.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
Pay
And
the writers,
now.
play the actors.
Give the man his due. He's wearing the tights. He's Daredevil.
Also, Howard, last thing, check out Werewolf by Night. I think you'd be surprised.
You enjoy it.
All right.
You enjoy it.
I'm in on She-Hulk and Werewolf by Night for Howard Bryant. For me, I am me. For Kate Fagan, who's not here, for Amin, who's not here, for Jake, who is here, for AC, who is here, I am Howard Bryant. We are signing off on Meadowlarkers 86. And maybe next time we'll talk a little bit about sports, but, maybe not. See you later.